Being poor, expensive. Being broke is decision. You've been told your income is the problem. It was never the amount, it's the leash it puts around your choices, and you've been holding the other end of it the whole time without noticing. By the end of this, you'll recognize yourself in at least 4 of these, and one of them is going to sting in a way the others won't. 500 years ago, Machiavelli watched princes lose entire kingdoms, not because they lacked soldiers or gold, but because they mistook comfort for control and confidence for readiness. He wasn't writing about politics, not really. He was writing about what happens to human judgment the moment pressure is applied to it. He watched men with real power make the exact same small, forgivable, dressed-up mistakes that people on modest incomes make every single week, just with a crown instead of a paycheck. 5 centuries later, the crown is gone. The mistakes never left. Only the currency changed. You think you have a money problem. You don't. You have 7 traps, and every single one of them is dressed up as something noble, as caution, as loyalty, as humility, as hard work. That's exactly why they've never been fixed. You can't fix a trap you've been calling a virtue. Here's what makes this different from the usual advice about budgeting or side hustles. None of that advice fails because it's wrong. It fails because it assumes the problem is a lack of information, as if nobody ever told you to save more or spend less. You already know that. Everyone already knows that. The traps on this list aren't information gaps. They're the reasons the information never gets used, even by people who could recite it word for word. You come home after a 10-hour shift, and you're exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. So the app. Again. You tell yourself it's fine, it's just tonight, you've earned it. That word, earned, is doing a lot of quiet work. It's covering for something you don't actually want to look at directly, which is that the reward has nothing to do with the day and everything to do with how powerless the day made you feel. This is the comfort trap, and it doesn't announce itself as weakness. It shows up dressed as self-care, as the one small thing you're still allowed to control when everything bigger feels out of reach. The less control you have over your income, the more you spend trying to manufacture the feeling of control somewhere else. A coffee that costs more than it should, a delivery order at 11 at night, a pair of shoes you didn't need, but that felt for about 4 minutes in the store, like a decision that was entirely yours. None of it feels reckless in the moment, because none of it is large in the moment. That's the design of it, not an accident of it. Now picture 2 people, same job, same shift, same exhaustion at the end of it. One of them has quietly decided that nothing that numbs the day gets to touch the money that's supposed to change the decade. The other hasn't decided anything. They're just tired, and tired people reach for whatever's closest. The first person still wants the delivery order. They still feel the pull toward the thing that would make tonight easier. They just don't let the want write the check. Over a single year, the gap between those 2 people isn't willpower, and it isn't income. It's roughly $4,000, the exact size of a starter investment account, sitting instead in 40 or 50 forgettable orders that nobody could tell you the contents of 6 months later. Machiavelli believed a ruler who spends to feel powerful in the moment loses the power that would have actually lasted. Comfort spending is the same trade, just smaller, quieter, and easier to justify at 11 at night. So the next time the urge shows up, don't ask what you're buying. Ask what you are trying to feel, and whether $4,000 a year is really the going rate for that feeling. There's a smaller version of this trap that's even easier to miss, because it never shows up as a single purchase at all. It shows up as a mood. A bad meeting turns to a bigger lunch order. A rough commute turns into a taxi you didn't need to take. None of these individually would ever make it onto a list of financial mistakes, if someone asked you to name your worst ones. That's exactly why they survive. They're too small, too frequent, and too emotionally justified to ever get flagged by the part of your brain that's supposed to be watching the money. Is working harder actually the plan here, or is it just the thing that lets you avoid building one? Most people on a modest income believe more hours is the strategy. Show up early, take the extra shift, stay 20 minutes past the end of your shift because someone asked, and trust that eventually it adds up to something. Sometimes it does, but hours are a currency with a hard ceiling. There are only so many you can sell before your body sends the invoice, in the form of a bad back, a short temper, a version of you too depleted at the end of the week to do anything but recover. This is the busy trap, and it disguises itself as work ethic, as responsibility, as the honest path instead of the shortcut. The honest path is real. It's also incomplete. And incompleteness is exactly what makes a trap dangerous. It's not a lie, it's a half-truth wearing the clothes of a full one. Somewhere on the exact same pay, someone decided to spend 2 of their off hours a week not working more, but getting better at the one thing in their industry that pays a different rate. The certification nobody wants to sit through. The piece of software one avoids because as the manual is boring, the skills another employee into the person we can't afford to lose. A year later, they're clocking the same hours you are. They're just being paid a different number for them, and the gap only widens from there because leverage compounds and hours don't. Machiavelli warned that fortune favors the prepared, not the exhausted. That effort spent without leverage behind it just wears down the person exerting it, one long shift at a time, without ever moving them anywhere. Here's the uncomfortable part nobody tells you when you're deep inside the busy trap. Exhaustion feels like proof. It feels like evidence that you're doing everything right, that the tiredness itself is receipt for a life being lived correctly. It isn't. Exhaustion is just a byproduct of effort. It has never once, on its own, been proof that the effort was aimed anywhere useful. 2 people can be equally exhausted at the end of the same week, and only one of them is closer to anything. You've stayed at that job 3 years past the point it stopped making sense to you. Say the reason out loud and it sounds almost admirable. Loyalty, gratitude, not wanting to seem ungrateful for an opportunity somebody once gave you. That's the loyalty trap, and it might be the most flattering trap on this entire list, because it lets you feel like a genuinely good person, while a company quietly benefits from the fact that you've never once asked for what you're actually worth to them. Loyalty is supposed to run both directions. For most people on a low income, it doesn't. It's a one-way arrangement dressed up as virtue, and it survives specifically because the person paying you knows you'll call it loyalty before you call it what it actually is. There's a version of you that clocks in early, covers other people's shifts, never complains, and gets "we really appreciate you" instead of a raise year after year, and somehow the appreciation is supposed to be the currency. Somewhere else, someone with your exact skill set, your exact experience, asked for a raise, got told the budget didn't allow it, and left within the month for 18% more at a company that had never even met them yet. They weren't disloyal. They were accurate about what loyalty is actually owed to a paycheck that has never once been loyal back to them. Machiavelli never called loyalty foolish, he called blind loyalty, the kind that's never tested, never questioned, and never once walked away from, the fastest way for a prince to be quietly used by the people beneath him. Notice what's actually being asked of you in the loyalty trap. Not effort, you were already giving that. Not skill, you already had that too. What's being asked is silence. The quiet agreement to never mention the number, never compare it to the market, never let the company find out you know exactly what you're worth somewhere else. That silence is the entire transaction. And it's the one thing you were never actually required to give away for free. And here's where the math stops being abstract and starts being personal. The traps so far have cost you opportunities, a raise you didn't ask for, a skill you didn't build, 3 years you didn't need to give away for free. The ones coming next don't just cost you opportunities, they cost you the ground you've already gained quietly, in amounts too small to notice until the total arrives all at once. Someone earning 6 figures a year and someone earning a third of that can end up in the exact same financial position 5 years from now. And it's rarely the income gap that decides it. It's a habit so small it never registers as a decision. Money leaving in amounts too tiny to feel like spending. A subscription you forgot existed, still charging you every month for an app you opened twice. A $4 coffee that's actually $7 once the extras get added 3 times a week, without ever once feeling like a purchase worth remembering. This is the invisible spending trap, and it disguises itself as insignificance, as things too small to matter, too small to track, too small to be anyone's real problem. But small, repeated, and unexamined is exactly how money disappears without ever technically being stolen from you. Now put that same $6 or $7 a day next to someone who tracks every transaction, not out of paranoia, not because they enjoy spreadsheets, but out of a basic respect for where their own money actually goes once it leaves their hands. Over a single year, the gap between those two people is over $2,000, invisible the entire way there, and simply gone the entire way there. Machiavelli said the threats a ruler never sees are the ones that actually cost him the kingdom, not the ones he prepares for. The visible expenses were never the real danger here. The invisible ones always were, and they still are, quietly in your own banking app right now. Try something tonight, not next week. Open your last statement and circle every charge under $15. Don't judge them yet, just circle them. Most people who do this for the first time are shocked not by any single charge, but by the total at the bottom of all the circles, a number that was always there, just never added up out loud until this exact moment. Ask yourself something honest, the kind of honest you don't usually let yourself be. When was the last time you bought something not because you needed it, but because you needed someone else to see you having it? That car payment on a salary that can't really support it without a second thought behind it. That upgraded phone bought the same week the old one still worked fine. This is the borrowed status trap, and it wears the most expensive disguise on this entire list. It looks like success when it's actually the exact opposite of it. It's financing the appearance of having made it at precisely the moment you can least afford the monthly bill that comes attached to the appearance. Someone on your exact income, driving a car twice your car's age, wearing clothes with nothing left to prove, is quietly investing the difference every single month without telling anyone about it, because there's nothing to perform. In 3 years, they own something that grows. You still owe something that depreciates the second you drive it off the lot. The math here isn't close, and it was never designed to be close. A financed image costs you interest, compounding against you in the background. An unfinanced life costs you nothing but other people's opinions, and those opinions were never going to pay a single one of your bills anyway. There's a specific moment this trap likes to strike, and it's worth naming because you'll recognize it instantly. It's not when you're struggling. It's right after a small win, a bonus, a good month, a compliment from someone whose opinion matters to you. That's when the upgrade suddenly feels justified, earned, overdue. The trap doesn't wait for your weakest moment. It waits for the one right after your strongest, when your guard is down precisely because things just went well. Machiavelli understood that a prince who needs to be seen as powerful is already, by definition, less powerful than the one who doesn't need to prove it to anybody. Status you have to finance was never status to begin with. It was rent, paid monthly to other people's expectations of you. Think about the last time someone else's purchase actually changed how you felt about your own life for longer than a day. Struggle to remember one. That's not a coincidence. Borrowed status has an expiration date built into it. It fades the moment the next person shows up with something newer, which means you're not just financing an image, you're financing an image with a shelf life shorter than the loan that paid for it. You don't ask for help because you don't want to seem like you need it. You don't ask what the job actually pays before you apply, because it feels rude, presumptuous, like you're getting ahead of yourself. You don't negotiate the freelance rate, the raise, the price, because some part of you decided a long time ago that wanting more, out loud, in front of another person, makes you look greedy instead of simply accurate. This is the silence trap. And of every trap on this list, it's the one that costs the most while looking the most like humility, which is exactly why almost nobody catches themselves doing it. Somewhere, someone with less experience than you, less time in the industry than you, asked for more money in a job interview. Not because they were more talented than you, but because they were the only person in the room willing to say the number first, out loud, and then let the silence after it do the negotiating for them. Over a working lifetime, the gap between the person who never asks and the person who always does isn't a few dollars here and there. Economists who study this exact pattern put the lifetime cost of never negotiating at well over $100,000 for the identical job, the identical skill, the identical output. The only variable being who was willing to say the number first and sit in the silence that followed it. Machiavelli never mistook humility for strategy. He believed a ruler who won't state plainly what he's owed will always eventually be told by someone else what he's worth instead, and it will always be less than he actually was. The uncomfortable thing about the silence trap is that it doesn't feel like fear in the moment. It feels manners. It feels like the polite, reasonable thing to do, which is exactly why it survives so much longer than the traps that actually feel bad while you're inside them. Fear you can name. Manners you defend. You started saving the moment you had extra. The quiet problem in that sentence is that you never actually had extra, because extra was always defined by default as whatever happened to be left over after everything else got paid first. This is the delayed start trap, and it's the quietest one on the entire list, because it doesn't feel like avoidance at all. It feels like responsibility, like waiting for the sensible, grown-up moment instead of acting recklessly with money you can't afford to lose. But the sensible moment, for almost everyone, never simply arrives on its own. It has to be manufactured on purpose, deliberately, with money that was never going to feel like extra, no matter how long you waited for it to. Someone earning less than you currently do started putting away $20 a week the month they got their very first paycheck, not because $20 changes anything meaningful on its own, but because starting changes who you are while you're waiting for the amount to eventually matter. 10 years later, that person isn't rich. They're simply not starting from zero anymore, which turns out to be the entire difference between the decade most people live through and the 1 decade a small number of people actually manage to build something out of. Machiavelli believed fortune only ever favors those already in motion the moment opportunity finally arrives, never the ones still waiting patiently for the perfect entry point that was never coming. There's a version of you, right now, waiting for a number to arrive before you start. A bigger paycheck, a paid-off debt, a calmer month. That number was never actually the requirement. It was the excuse, dressed up convincingly enough that you never had to look directly at the fact that starting was always available, at any amount from day one. Notice something about that number 2. It moves. Ask someone waiting to start at the right income what that income actually is, specifically, and watch how often the figure changes depending on the day you ask. That's not a coincidence, and it isn't a flaw in their math. It's the trap protecting itself, quietly relocating the finish line anytime you get close enough to actually reach it. Here's the part most people watching this genuinely don't want to hear about: the man whose name has been attached to every single point so far. Machiavelli, broke, exiled from Florence, stripped publicly of his position, tortured briefly on suspicion of conspiracy he had no part in. He spent his final years writing his most famous work from a small farmhouse outside the city, sending letter after letter to former allies begging for any position, any job, any way back in, and it never came. He understood how power actually worked better than almost anyone in recorded history, and he still died with almost none of it, and very little money to leave behind. Knowing exactly how these traps operate, being able to name every single one of them from memory, was never once enough to save the man who identified them from falling into several of his own. That's not irony. That's the entire point of bringing him up at all. Understanding these 7 traps intellectually, nodding along quietly, agreeing that that's me, and so is that one. None that moves a single dollar of your money anywhere unless something changes tomorrow morning, not just in your head tonight, while this is still fresh. Think about how strange that actually is. The man who arguably understood power and self-interest better than anyone of his era still couldn't apply it to his own circumstances when it mattered most for him personally. Insight was never his shortage. Something else always is, for everyone, and it's rarely the thing people assume it is when they're looking for an excuse. So here's what changes tomorrow morning. 3 things, nothing complicated about any of them. First, open a separate account at a different bank than the one you use every day, with no card attached to it, nothing you can swipe from your phone, and move even $20 into it the day you get paid, before anything else touches that money. The amount matters far less than the order it happens in. Second, pick one subscription or recurring charge you haven't consciously thought about in the last 30 days, and cancel it tonight, not because it's expensive, but because forgetting it existed in the first place was always the actual problem. And canceling it is you proving to yourself that you noticed. Third, the next time you're offered a rate, a wage, or a price for your work, say one sentence before you accept anything. Is there flexibility here? And then stop talking and let the silence that follows do the negotiating for you. That single sentence, said out loud instead of swallowed, is worth more across your working lifetime than almost anything else on this entire list combined. None of these 3 things require you to earn more before you can start. That's the point of choosing them. Every trap on this list survives on the belief that change has to wait for circumstances to improve first. These don't for anything. They work at the income you have right now, tonight, not the income you're hoping to have eventually. Being poor was never really the problem. Being broke is still a decision. You're just the one quietly making it, one small disguised, entirely forgivable choice at a time, the same way you have been for years, without ever once calling it that. The traps don't disappear because you watched a video naming them. They disappear the next time one shows up in your actual life, and you recognize it by name a few seconds before it recognizes you. That's the actual skill underneath everything covered here. Not discipline, not motivation, not some sudden windfall for changing the numbers overnight. Recognition. The half-second gap between the trap starting to close and you noticing it's the same one you've fallen into before. Every person who has ever built something out of very little learned to shorten that gap, one uncomfortable recognition at a time. until the traps stopped working on them the way they used to. This channel isn't here to motivate you for 25 minutes and then disappear until the next one. It's here to name the traps nobody else in this space is willing to name out loud, one at a time, without the fluff. If even one of these 7 had your name written on it somewhere, say which one in the comments, not the safest one to admit, the real one, and subscribe if you want the rest of them named too, before they name you first.